Hi, well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here today and to talk with you about innovation and competitiveness. I'm going to jump right in. Here we go. Okay. So for those of you who don't know about ITIF, we're a think tank. We focus on innovation in the IT space, but also in other areas as well. And in the last few years, have focused a lot on benchmarking innovation both around the U.S. and around the world, and I'll talk a little bit about that and what that means. So this is what I want to talk about today. I'll just sort of go very briefly through the first parts of that and then talk a lot about the benchmarking innovation. I think it's important, one thing I think that we miss a lot in the innovation community is people understand that that's innovation, but they forget that this is also innovation. In other words, that the focus is largely on product innovation, but oftentimes we forget about that really what it's also about is innovation being deployed throughout the economy. This is, I think, a good example of innovation there. This is not this looks like an old economy machine, but really what it is it's a new economy machine embedded with IT and other innovations that make this a much more effective device than what it replaced. So why do we care about innovation? Largely because innovation is how we develop better tools. Better tools is how we drive progress. But at the macro level, we care about innovation because most of what's called the new growth theory that economists have pioneered over the last decade or so now convincingly show that it's not capital or labor that drives growth, it's innovation. Some studies suggest as much as 90% of per capita income growth in regions, nations, is driven by innovation. If you also look at this, the second one, a number of very good studies found that the social rate of return from research is significantly higher than the private rate of return, which suggests that absent public policies like research parks, but also R&D tax credits, public funding of research, a whole set of initiatives. Absent those policies, nations and regions will significantly underinvest in research. If you just rely on the industry and private sector to do it, they're not going to do it anywhere near what we need. You can see that innovation drives productivity. So it really is now the key to economic prosperity, pretty much regardless of where you are located. But at the regional level, it's also key. A study by Michael Porter was looking at regional variation in per capita income in the U.S. and differences in patenting intensity explains 30% of regional variation in incomes. Another professor used to be here at Chapel Hill, now over in Austria, Harvey Goldstein, found that it was not just patenting, but also the amount of corporate R&D that was done in a region that was highly influential in determining per capita income in a region. When we see that clearly just in terms of high-tech clusters, if we look at high-tech clusters like Research Triangle Park, but also optics in Rochester, New York, or semiconductors in Silicon Valley, or biotechnology in Philadelphia, we see that the wage levels in those clusters are significantly higher than in non-technology clusters. And lastly, a study that we do called the State New Economy Index, which I'll talk a little bit about. If you just do a simple correlation between growth in per capita income in states and these factors, you get very strong correlation. So 0.5 positive correlation with high-tech jobs, venture capital is about 0.5, R&D investment by industry, just having scientists and engineers is very strongly correlated with growth in per capita income. So the other reason innovation matters is most economists look at the economy as essentially in equilibrium. You and I would all laugh at that notion because as we experience the economy, it is in nothing related to equilibrium. It's in a set of constant change. And that's really what Joseph Schumpeter talked about 50 years ago. But this is even more true today, which is why Schumpeter has been a sort of a resurgence of popularity in his work. Because what Schumpeter's talking about is in this economy, there's so much dynamism and so much change and so much what he calls creative destruction that if a region or a nation is not constantly on the edge of innovation and moving forward, they will be left behind. So what do we know about innovation now in a period like this where we have global economic challenges pretty much everywhere, even in places like China where they're not going to grow as fast, they're going to grow but not as fast, but certainly almost everywhere. What we find that's interesting is actually innovation and entrepreneurship don't do that badly during downturns if you look at past downturns. This is one of the studies by David Adresh and Zoltan Aks found that startups respond positive to growth. That's what you would expect. But one of the other factors that drives them is low cost of capital and higher unemployment, which is exactly the situation we have today. High unemployment leads to more startups as people lose their jobs and they want to take opportunities. But also an interesting study that the quality of these startups is higher in recessions. So there may not be quite as many of them, but their ability to grow and succeed is actually higher. I talked to David, who's a colleague of mine, and I asked him before this, I said, David, have you done any updates to this study, which, as you can see, was 94? And he said, no, we didn't do an update to it because we thought there'd never be another big recession. So, goes to show what academics don't know, or any of us, really. So this is another study by a corporate research board. You can just see the number of high-impact startups. These are startups that you would call gazelles or high-growth startups. And you can see they fall a little bit, that sort of 2002 period with the recession, they fall a little bit, but not all that much. So it suggests that there are real opportunities out there for firms to start up, to get a foothold, if you will, and then grow significantly once the economy comes back. Last slide on this, if you look at corporate R&D, surprisingly, if you look at corporate R&D in years where there's been a recession in the U.S., versus non-recession years, you find that the growth of a corporate R&D is higher during recession years. Very, very counterintuitive to what you would expect. If you just look at investment as a share of R&D, as a share of GDP, that's what I should say. You can see it's almost the same. So corporations now, in particular now, don't seem to be cutting R&D significantly because they want to be well positioned for the upturn. So another piece of this also that I think is interesting is that the U.S. innovation system, and I would argue probably the innovation system around the world, has changed in dramatic ways that affect, I think, what you do. One of them is innovation has become much more collaborative, and that directly affects what you do. This was a study that a colleague of ours did and published to an ITIF report called Where Do Innovations Come From? Transformation in the U.S. National Innovation System. And what Fred and his team did, they're out of University of California, Davis, they went back and they looked at the top 100 innovations that R&D Magazine awards every year. So R&D Magazine has a contest. They pick the top 100 innovations. Things like the Polaroid camera have won in the past, things like that. They went back and they looked at where do these innovations come from? And they sampled 3 years for the 4 decades, so 300 innovations in each decade. And what they found was that innovations in the 70s and 80s largely came from big multinational corporations acting on their own. So they would have a laboratory, they would think about something, they'd figure it out, and out would pop an innovation and get into the commercial marketplace. You can see in the 70s it was about, this is the flip side of this now. These are innovations where there's some form of collaboration. And you can, in other words, these would be innovations where a company is working with a federal laboratory, a university, small companies. And you can see that the number of collaborations now, over 2/3 or 3/4 of the U.S. innovations from U.S. companies are coming from collaboration. One of them that we found, for example, is that federal laboratories are involved in about 25% of the innovations that win these awards. Universities are involved in about that many. SBIR, which is an award program for small firms. So the U.S. innovation system has dramatically moved into this much more complex and collaborative system. And again, you can think about research parks as really at the hub of that. That's what they do.